Welcome to One Chapter, One Thought. I'm Pastor Chris from Lincroft Bible Church in New Jersey, and every weekday I read one chapter of the New Testament and offer one brief devotional thought. Today's reading is from the book of 2 Corinthians, chapter 9. For it is superfluous for me to write to you about this ministry to the saints. For I know your readiness, of which I boast about you to the Macedonians, namely that Achaia has been prepared since last year, and your zeal has stirred up most of them. But I have sent the brethren in order that our boasting about you may not be made empty in this case, so that, as I was saying, you may be prepared. Otherwise, if any Macedonians come with me and find you unprepared, we, not to speak of you, will be put to shame by this confidence. So I thought it necessary to urge the brethren that they would go on ahead of you and arrange beforehand your previously promised bountiful gift, so that the same would be ready as a bountiful gift and not affected by covetousness. Now, I say this, the one who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Each one must do just as he has purposed in his heart, not grudgingly or under compulsion, because God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that, having all sufficiency in everything, you may have an abundance for every good deed. As it is written, He scattered abroad, He gave to the poor, His righteousness endures forever. Now, He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest of your righteousness. You will be enriched in everything for all liberality, which is through us in producing thanksgiving to God. For the ministry of this service is not fully supplying the needs of the saints, but is overflowing through many thanksgivings to God. Because of the proof given by this ministry, they will glorify God for your obedience to your confession of the gospel of Christ and for the liberality of the contribution to them and to all, while they also, by prayer on your behalf, yearn for you because of the surpassing grace of God in you. Thanks be to God for His indescribable gift. One thought. One of Paul's aims of his ministry was to raise money for the suffering Christians in Jerusalem. And so he is asking that the Corinthians give support to their brothers and sisters. And in 2 Corinthians 9, Paul teaches the church the right mindset about giving, providing a couple principles for how we should give. Number one, we should give generously. We see this in verse 6. It says, the one who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. The one who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Paul is using an agricultural metaphor to illustrate this principle. For example, if you're trying to grow a nice, lush lawn, you want to spread around a lot of grass seed. The more grass seed that you spread, the more grass will grow, and you'll have a nice, thick, lush lawn. But if you only throw a couple seeds down on the ground, you're not going to cover everything, and you'll get a very small amount of grass that grows. And that's what Paul is saying here. If you give generously, you will receive back generously. If you are stingy, then you won't receive back very much. Stinginess, according to Paul, is not a virtue. Then he says we should give cheerfully. In verse 7, each one must do just as he has purposed in his heart, not grudgingly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. So I think what Paul, he's trying to strike a balance here, right? In that he doesn't want people to feel pressured into giving a certain amount. There is a debate in the church about whether Christians need to tithe. Tithing is the practice of giving 10% of your income to the church, and that's based on this principle that comes from the Old Testament, where people were called to tithe or give a tenth of things to the Lord. Now, I don't think that tithing is mandated here in the New Testament for us, but I do think it's a good rule of thumb. My wife and I, we try to tithe and give about 10%. Sometimes, as we purposed in our hearts, we've given a little bit less, sometimes maybe a little bit more, depending on where things fall. But we try to be reflective on it and deliberate about it, and then give cheerfully. And that's, the Lord wants us to be happy about our giving. He doesn't want us to do it begrudgingly, right? But actually have joy, because there's so much joy to be found in giving to others. And then third, we give generously, we give cheerfully, and third, we give expectantly. And that's here in verse 8. God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that having all sufficiency in everything, you may have abundance for every good deed. And then he goes down in verse 10. He who supplies seed to the sower, bread for food, will supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest of your righteousness. What Paul is reminding the Corinthians and us as well is that God is greater than our needs and our fears. God is not he hasn't arranged his church. He hasn't arranged his kingdom economy, so to speak, where one group loses and another group wins if you happen to give money. No, he is greater than our needs and our fears. He is one who supplies all of our needs. And so we can put away a scarcity mindset in that if you give, God will meet your needs. Now, this isn't, again, a promise where we can presume, right, on the Lord and say, well, Lord, I gave this much and now you owe me, right? That's the completely wrong attitude. But God is, we should take heart and come and give expectantly, saying, okay, I'm giving this and I'm going to see God work and meet my needs in the way that he sees fit. And so God calls us to give with our hearts that are generous, cheerful, expectant. When we sow generously, we reap abundantly, not just material, but spiritually, seeing God's provision overflow in ways that we could never orchestrate ourselves. Giving is never about losing. It's about trusting that God multiplies what we offer for his kingdom and for our good. When we trust God with our giving, we can be people who give freely, joyfully, expectantly, knowing, right? And this is important, knowing that God will supply all our needs and use our gifts to bless those around us.